Well, Governor J.B. Pritzker saying it's ridiculous to expect justices to recuse themselves after he gave them $2 million, $1 million each. Good morning, Springfield's Morning News. I'm Greg Bishop on 92.7 WMAY, Springfield's News and Talk. Catch me here live and local, 6 to 9 each and every weekday morning. After I leave the show, I go over to the Illinois State House where I follow what's going on, look at all the bills that are not all of the bills. All right, it's kind of impossible to actually go through all 6,500 bills that there are, but a lot of the stuff that goes through committees, we try to keep an eye on, and we report that out for Illinois Radio Network and the Center Square. So that's what I do outside of the morning show here. So part of my day yesterday was going and seeing what the governor had to say at a news conference. And he talked about behavioral health, which is absolutely an extremely important issue that needs to be addressed. He also talked about the Schultz Developmental Center that he's wanting to transfer into different parts of the state because of ongoing problems with staffing there and the allegations that a lot of people seeing as just absolutely horrendous against individuals who live at that facility. But I had to get a question in about the story that keeps developing here with the gun ban that's in front of the Illinois Supreme Court now. And the question was about two Illinois Supreme Court justices that got $1 million each from the governor. And if you missed this story, the breakdown is essentially that you have two Supreme Court justices that were given $1 million each, $500,000 from the governor's campaign fund and $500,000 from his trust fund. And that ultimately, right before the election, you got $2 million going to Supreme Court justices, Mary O'Brien, and also Supreme Court Justice Elizabeth Rochford, getting $1 million each. And they're set to hear the gun ban challenge. That's in front of the Supreme Court. That's coming up in mid-May. Briefs are going to be filed back and forth all throughout the rest of this month and through into April. But another case that's coming up even before the gun ban challenge from Macon County, that's the Safety Act no cash bail case that Governor J.B. Pritzker's a top defendant on. So you've got the governor, a top defendant on the no cash bail case, Governor Pritzker, a top defendant on the gun ban case, and he gives $1 million each to Supreme Court just candidates, and you've got them possibly being on the bench to hear oral arguments on these important cases. So I had to ask the governor yesterday his thoughts, and really I'll let the question air itself. And a lot of you saw this at last night's round on YouTube or on Twitter. It's pretty incredible just how much this has been shared. But here's Governor J.B. Pritzker yesterday responding to my question. We got to get it queued up just right here. My apologies. And here we go. Explain the $1 million that you gave to each Supreme Court justices, and should they recuse themselves in two important cases coming up, Safety Act, no cash bail, and also the gun ban.
I am sure this is something that the right wing is trying to stir up. I know you've written about it. The fact of the matter is I supported candidates who are running all across the board. If you're suggesting that the fact that I gave money to, let's say, the Democratic Party or to the committees that supported candidates means that everybody who received any money has to recuse themselves from anything to do with the state of Illinois, that's ridiculous. And I've certainly never asked anybody to vote a certain way or decide on a case a certain way. I would never do that. I never have. I never will. And these are independent judges, and they didn't go around and campaign on things, that they thought would win my support for them. I believe in them. I supported them like lots of other people did.
Can you explain?
Thank you.
Did you circumvent the campaign finance rules that you signed?
No.
Again, Governor J.B. Pritzker responding to my question to explain his donations to Supreme Court justices and should they recuse themselves from two important cases coming up, the no cash bail case to be heard next week, and then the gun ban challenge that's going to be heard in May. And as he was walking away, I asked if he circumvented campaign finance rules that he approved last year, which said you can't give more than $500,000 to a judge candidate. And he gave gave $500,000 from his campaign fund, but then he also gave $500,000 from his revocable trust. So the governor responding to those questions, and coming up, I'll share with you the questions that are being raised to the plaintiff in the gun ban challenge. Dan Caulkins, he is of course the state representative in that case that's challenging the gun ban, advancing from the Macon County Court Friday, and now it's in front of the Illinois Supreme Court. I asked Representative Caulkins if these justices should recuse themselves. So we'll share that with you, but I'll also give you a bit of context of what I'm hearing from others on background of how to approach this particular question of recusal of justices or judges. So stay tuned. We'll get to that coming up. But of course, I want to take your phone calls anytime they come in at 217-629-7970. This is live and local radio, so you got the opportunity to get your voice heard. Again, 217-629-7970. Good morning. You're on WMAY.
Good morning, Greg. Maybe you know this. One of the Supreme Court judges' his husband was the same jerk that set up the tax thing for him in Chicago. Are they still sitting?
No, Ann Burke, I believe, is who you're talking about. She retired, and I believe her husband, Ed Burke, is heading towards a trial of sorts with a lot of corruption allegations. So,
yes.
Yeah, she's no longer on the bench.
I guess if you can't hire their husbands, you might as well pay them $1 million. Oh, I didn't say that.
I appreciate the call. And, hey, listen, we got a lot more to get to. Stay tuned. It is Springfield's Morning News on WMAY. And, of course, I want to get to more of your phone calls as well to react to what the governor had to say and also what State Representative Dan Caulkins had to say. Plus, we will hear more of a news conference yesterday where Caulkins and Republicans and even the Illinois State Rifle Association are doubling down, saying that Friday's ruling out of Macon County is good statewide. And I got the response from Illinois State Police as to if they're enforcing this. However, it leaves the question that I had to pose to the Illinois Attorney General late last night. Have yet to hear back. We'll keep you posted on that. So a lot to get to here this hour with Springfield's Morning News on WMA. And you're welcome to call in anytime throughout the program, 217-629-7970. You can also email me, bishoponair@gmail.com, and find me on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. Just search Bishop on Air, then we can make that happen. We're talking about Governor J.B. Pritzker saying it's ridiculous to think that a justice who he gave $1 million to needs to recuse himself or herself. And there are two Supreme Court justices on the bench now after winning election that received $1 million each from Governor J.B. Pritzker. You also have Pritzker as a named defendant in the gun ban case and the Safety Act no cash bail case that comes up next week in the Illinois Supreme Court. But it's not just Pritzker as a top defendant who gave money to these two Supreme Court justices. It's also House Speaker Emanuel Chris Welch, who's within, I think, like the top 5 donors to these two Supreme Court justices, giving one $350,000, giving another $150,000. So you've got that as well. And Welch is a top defendant in the gun ban case and the no cash bail case. So you've got that at play here. And again, I just want to reiterate the governor, his response to my question yesterday when I asked him if he could explain his $1 million contributions, but also whether or not these justices should recuse themselves.
Explain the $1 million that you gave to each Supreme Court justices, and should they recuse themselves in two important cases coming up: Safety Act, no cash bail, and also the gun ban.
I am sure this is something that the right wing is trying to stir up. I know you've written about it. The fact of the matter is I supported candidates who are running all across the board. If you're suggesting that the fact that I gave money to, let's say, the Democratic Party or to the committees that supported candidates means that everybody who received any money has to recuse themselves from anything to do with the state of Illinois, that's ridiculous. And I've certainly never asked anybody to vote a certain way or decide on a case a certain way. I would never do that. I never have. I never will. And these are independent judges, and they didn't go around and campaign on things, that they thought would win my support for them. I believe in them. I supported them like lots of other people did.
Can you explain?
Thank you.
Did you circumvent the campaign finance rules that you signed?
No.
So again, Governor J.B. Pritzker has a wealth of what, $3.6 billion. He spent, as somebody points out on Twitter, about $323 million. It's an interesting juxtaposition here with as much as the governor has given to political candidates, including Supreme Court justices. He's again spent $323 million in total. From the 2018 election to the 2022 election, all his own money. But to the question of should there be a recusal, interesting things being brought up here. Number one, somebody on Twitter says that there shouldn't be a recusal, and I'll just bring this up because the governor is the ex officio respondent in a case on governance. It's not personal litigation. So it's an interesting point. But, when talking with independent observers, including the Judicial Integrity Project, they indicated that there is going to be an air of conflict of interest. And any air of conflict of interest, any inkling of conflict of interest is enough to spur a lack of trust, a lack of faith in the judiciary, which is very damaging to our constitutional republic. So interesting to see that. But you've got others who are pointing out, and this we talked about the other day as well, a Supreme Court case, Caperton versus A.T. Massey Cole, where the United States Supreme Court issued a 5-4 ruling that judges who are elected are constitutionally barred from participating in cases involving donors who've given very large sums to their campaign. So what do you do in this situation? Should the justices recuse themselves? We heard Governor J.B. Pritzker respond to my question, saying that it's ridiculous. I asked State Representative Dan Caulkins that question yesterday. He is the lead plaintiff in the Macon County case that's headed to the Illinois Supreme Court. Here's what Caulkins had to say in response to my question, and I'll give you a little context of what some are telling me on background on how attorneys and others are to handle questions about judges who are set to possibly handle their cases. So here's my question and the response.
Governor Pritzker says it's ridiculous to think that Supreme Court justices he gave $1 million to each should recuse themselves. Says it's a right-wing talking point. Representative Caulkins, I don't know if you want to speak to that as the plaintiff in this case, but should these two Supreme Court justices recuse themselves?
That's up to them. We're not asking for that. We're not pursuing that. That's not an issue. Our issue is that this is an unconstitutional law. Our process goes to the Illinois Supreme Court, where we expect to get a fair hearing and defend our judgment, and we're not concerned about that.
Anybody else want to speak to that?
There you go.
Governor Pritzker says
again, the question about whether or not these justices should recuse themselves, Caulkins approaching that cautiously, I guess, saying that that's not what they're looking for, saying that that's going to be up to the justices, and also that they just are challenging this on the constitutionality, and they expect to have a fair hearing. Now, one thing that I've talked with attorneys way before this case, around this case, and beyond, and one thing that I always hear too is even back when there were challenges against the mask mandate and COVID policies and such, attorneys weren't willing to impugn judges because of the collegiality that there is, because of the understanding that the judiciary is very much held to a high standard, and they realize that, and the judges themselves can recognize conflicts of interest, and there's no need for people to push them to recuse themselves. That seems to kind of be the behind the scenes understanding of why, especially in a question. And I that's what I do. I ask questions and ask questions to anybody and everybody who will answer, and they can answer however they want. And it seems that in the context of challenging the integrity of a judge, when it comes to attorneys, when it comes to officers of the courts, when it comes to plaintiffs in cases, it's not necessarily advised to have them go out on a huge speaking tour blasting judges that could be handling their case. So it's an issue of like good faith. At the same time, an issue of recognizing that judges do indeed hold themselves to higher standards. So we'll see what happens. And it's going to be very telling to see if these two justices do recuse themselves, not just in the gun ban case, which, again, that's going to be heard mid-May. We've got the no cash bail case where Governor Pritzker is a lead defendant in that, where Chris Welch, Speaker of the House, is a lead defendant in that. That's going to be in front of the Illinois Supreme Court next week. So will those two justices, Mary O'Brien and Elizabeth Rochford, will they be on the bench when the no cash bail hearing is heard next week? That's going to be an interesting question. So we'll, of course, follow that up here with Springfield's Morning News. I'm Greg Bishop. Follow me, Bishop on Air, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. Just search Bishop on Air, and we can connect that way.